I was moved to create this upon seeing a statistic from a study in 2013, which claimed that 47% of women said their husbands caused them more stress than their children. So let's unpack this. First off, I don't think for a second that doesn't balance out between the sexes. Men would probably say that second to work, their wives are the biggest stressors in their lives. So let's not try to live in a fairy tale where men are the villain here. But let's unpack why so many women feel this way. Society really does not live in reality when it comes to marriage and marital expectations. More and more people are marrying when they are extremely ill-prepared. They don't understand what marriage is for. They believe the lie that relationships are supposed to be fairy tales, and as soon as they stop liking their partner, they ought to move on. And this goes both ways. Marriage, like parenting, is a sacrificial relationship. Love is a decision to lay down one's own desires for the good of the other. Oftentimes, there's really no payout if this devotion is not reciprocated. We also have a very toxic, me-centered culture where miserable people see happy people and try to bring them down, since misery loves company. People would rather sit around in their martyrdom, gossiping and wailing, instead of trying to change their situation. This is why you have the cliche of single women who want to ruin their girlfriends' relationships, or even stop them from getting into one in the first place. Subconscious or even overt jealousy. We don't want anyone else to be happy if we aren't. But stay with me, trust me, I'm bringing this all back around. Everything is always connected. I once read a quality blog post from a woman who was in a happy marriage, but ached for mom friends. So she joined a mom group to socialize, and found that all the women complained nonstop about their husbands. And despite the fact that this woman loved her husband and was very happy in her marriage, she found herself thinking the same way as these women, trying to find reasons to resent him. He didn't notice enough or do enough to pick up the slack. She ended up separating herself from those women because they genuinely made her mindset, her emotional state, and her marriage much worse. Now imagine our entire American society as that women's group, because it is. It's also the same vice versa for men's groups. We're all encouraged to have disdain 99% of the time for the opposite sex. They won't date me. Men or women are so picky. Then when they're married, they don't care how much I work. They don't care about making themselves look good for me. They're slobs and they don't pick up after themselves. They fail to notice anything that I do. And the list goes on. And what do we find when we search for consolation or a safe place to vent our frustrations? Hate groups. Even Christian ones. You're really not supposed to put your husband on blast to tons of strangers on the internet, because that's disrespectful as hell. Most of the time on any given post, it's women who should be redirecting that frustrated woman towards happiness, who keeps her down. We see hate groups for the opposite sex, husband and wives, children, religion, specific people. It goes on. These groups are hate groups because that's what they generate, which is the definition of a hate group. There's a reason why the few people who promote positivity are so damn notable. It's because they're so refreshingly different. But the broader picture aside, and looking deeper into modern American marriages, how could a woman feel this way about her husband, that he produces more stress than her children? And don't worry, men, I will speak on your woes as well. Women feel stretched. It's that simple. We no longer live in communities. We no longer feel supported. And if someone doesn't make us feel supported, they're a source of stress. The mother-in-law who shows up to your house and doesn't do anything to help you around the house, and if she does, makes you feel judged. The guests who don't clean up after themselves or need you to wait on them hand and foot. And the husband who plays video games when you've got a dirty kitchen, a mountain of laundry, and no end in sight of the housework that needs to get done. Despair. That's what these women feel. Despair. And men have, quite honestly, not been raised well the last couple of generations. There's still little boys who get addicted to video games, or because of the pendulum swing caused by feminism, become so anti-feminist that they actually become a little bit chauvinist, which I honestly see a lot of, even in the most Christian marriages. Men are protectors and providers at the very core of their being, which means that they have a burning desire to protect and provide physically, emotionally, and mentally for their tribe. And that's what a family is. It's a tribe. But what we see so often now is men wanting to take a back seat to leading because my wife's strong, she's got this. When no, just because a wife and mother is tough doesn't mean she doesn't need constant support. A stone bridge, while strong, still needs constant support to function. And the more it takes on, the more support it requires so it doesn't collapse. So not only is it a stress on a woman when her husband thrusts her into a leadership role, but men will take an even further back seat to acknowledging that she needs support because they weren't raised to be aware of it. So now, of course, wives see husbands as more stressful than children because they are capable adults who want the same attention as children, like all people, but they don't make that attention feel reciprocated to the wife. Wives just want husbands to notice. Notice how much wouldn't be done without them. Notice how much of herself she pours into parenting. Notice how much needs to get done. And that's not to say that husbands don't deserve breaks. But wives and mothers get a tiny percentage of the breaks that husbands and fathers do. Because women bear the mental load. Women will understand when I say this. Women are so used to bearing the mental load that when they suddenly don't have to, when their husbands tell them, hey, go have a break, I've got all this, they cannot turn their brains off. Their brains cannot relax because it's a conditioned, natural state. Men, I want you to imagine working nonstop. Like whether your job is a desk job or a workbench, working all waking hours. Walking away from that desk and bench for an hour a few times a week here and there, honestly, is just not that helpful. But having a team member that you can rely on so that you can turn off your brain a more substantial part of the day changes your life. You can finally rest and generally live a life much more peaceful and happier. It's far closer to the situation a lot of men have, where they can physically go to work, come home, and no longer be at work. Mothers, whether they work outside the home or not, don't have that. And it is because of the lack of community and support they have, whether it's outside of their home or within. I do believe men cannot fathom why it's unhelpful to give his wife a break here and there. But if they see it from the point of view, from their boss sticking their head into his office and saying, hey man, why don't you take a break for an hour? But remember, all that work still needs to get done, even if you take a break. And you'll have to work harder and faster to get everything done when you get back. But hey, you earned that break. And he has to go back to work until he sleeps. And that's what it's like for women. If a man wants to be a support to his wife and make her feel less stressed out, instead of taking the kids off her hands and just playing video games in the same room as them, he actually takes something off her plate. Might I recommend? Clean the damn kitchen. It's always dirty. It's always stressing her out. It needs to be cleaned like 4 times a day. Taking one of those cleanings is support. Not just taking the kids while you do what you want and she still has to work harder after her break, in order to keep things afloat and running smoothly. And I would be amiss if I didn't mention that a huge stressor for wives is telling their husbands when they need something and this being ignored, usually accompanied by an underwhelming promise that they'll get to it, only to forget it. And that always, always signals 2 things to the wife. 1, their husbands don't give a damn about them. And 2, they cannot rely on their husbands. This means they cannot trust their husbands. That is why it is vital, 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 vital for men to do what they say they will do. Now, this is not to say that you should just bow down to all your wife's unreasonable demands. Not at all, because she still owes you respect. But if your wife gives you a reasonable request, you should do it. She's trying to lean on you for support. When you don't do it, that's why you stress her out more than the children. It reinforces that she's alone, that she has to rely on herself for her needs being met. Men, heed this. It is your fault if your wife becomes a nag. That's the general breakdown of how women can see their husbands as a bigger stressor than children. But I promise to delve into the man's point of view, so to be fair, that's what I'm going to do. I think men very likely see their wives as great stressors as well. They, like women, generally feel underappreciated, but men oftentimes nowadays, and I believe this is due to cultural conditioning, just turn off. It hits a guy differently when he perceives disrespect, and they try desperately to avoid these feelings, and unfortunately, they oftentimes escape to fantasy, whether it's porn, video games, something generally unhealthy. Now, this avoidant tactic is a vicious, vicious cycle. The wife is stressed out because she doesn't feel supported. The husband's brain doesn't understand what's going on. All he knows is that he wants to just not be around a woman who typically acts passively aggressive and makes him feel bad, like he's not a good enough provider and protector. So he escapes, which is why the wife gets even more upset. And now he's constantly reminded by men, oh, dude, she's so ungrateful. You work so hard, and it's never enough for her. She wants you to come home and take over her not real job. Although oftentimes when men take over, they complain about the time and effort that not real job takes. So she can live whatever life she wants and just dump everything on you. She's an ungrateful slob. Why isn't your house sparkling all the time? All she does is stay home. It's so easy. And since misery loves company, and one will seldom find a male friend who will point out to him, man, I just think she's stressed out. Have you talked to her about it? The marriage remains stressful. In fact, most men will say that they don't feel like they have anyone to confide in. Not only have women been separated from support, men have as well. It's hard for women to find good, authentic women that they can be friends with. And it's almost impossible for men to have friends that he knows he can count on, who will be able to emotionally support him. So here you have two people in a marriage who don't feel supported by their partner or others, and when they look for support, all they get are hate groups, big and small, of people telling them that they deserve better than their partner, who everyone just thinks exists to make the complaining one happy. Both men and women have been gypped by our current culture, differently, and men slightly more. Generally speaking, the last few generations of men have no idea what it is to be a man. All they know is that women don't like them because they're men. They aren't good enough to date. They don't have close friends. Their own fathers weren't real men. They have no idea how to deal with their anger and animosity. So they escape into fantasies because they don't feel good enough about themselves. So they escape into fantasy. And then addiction comes into play, and then that makes them even harder to get along with. There's the cliche of girlfriends and wives complaining about men's various time addictions that take them away emotionally from their relationship. And these are extremely valid, but it's what men have. They don't feel supported either. Men are treated very, very poorly by society. They're automatically looked at as pervs and predators even when they aren't. Men have to earn their value. And they know that if they fail to reach certain benchmarks, they are seen by others, at least subconsciously, as failures. It's why when men start working out, they care so much about being able to lift a certain amount of weight. It's something attainable that they can see that makes them feel accomplished. It's personal validation because they don't receive personal validation. Women are told constantly that they're pretty, even when they aren't. Most men never receive compliments, no matter how hard they work. So both men and women feel like they are burning at both ends. To give a testimony about this, Last July was really hard on me and my husband. All month long, really terrible things kept happening to me, and it was a nonstop roller coaster of just PTSD episodes. So I was very unavailable to my family and just trying to keep them all afloat while I felt like I was drowning. And then my husband's brother ended his life at the end of July. My husband tailspinned. And of course, there I was already drowning, and now I needed to keep him afloat. I couldn't rely on him for support. Everyone was looking at someone drowning to be the lifeguard. Months passed and we lived in this next to useless state. I kept my kids alive, and that was about it. I kept trying desperately to gain back control of my life, but it's really, really hard to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. And I not only had to do that for myself, but I had to do that for my husband too. It took me months to get my life together, and I managed to, a short while later, help my husband as well. We're doing really good now, but it's slow but sure. We're waking up at a decent time, working out, eating right, and I'm back on a solid schedule with my children's school and Veritas on the Rocks. We're doing it, but it's hard. I had to coach my husband on how to support me because I started drowning again under all the responsibilities, and I was responsible for bringing him back from the dead, so I couldn't let him go down too. He did two things. First, he acknowledged this. He fought me at first, but about 3 weeks into my helping him make positive life changes, he said to me that he appreciates how dedicated I am to his well-being and how much he's grateful for me working with him. And two, a couple weeks later, he saw how stressed out I was and asked how he could help, authentically help. And he listened. And he's getting better about supporting me because while he might still have to be explicitly told what I need, he gives a damn. That's the secret sauce to marriage, you know? Just giving a damn. Feeling like your spouse gives a damn. The other person feeling like you give a damn. The other person acknowledging that while they might not be able to comprehend where you're coming from and why quick fixes don't fix everything easily, they're still dedicated to understanding. Men, women. That's most of the battle. The humbling of yourself. And you will be met with confusion, then anger, because it's challenging the reality, and they need to protect their reality in order to emotionally and mentally survive. But stand your ground, then brace for the fall, and then catch them. Your spouse just wants to be understood. They want you to care that they're stressed out, and I promise you, they are, and I've given you the reasons in this video. Now, go make your relationship your safe place. Put out all of those hate groups. Look at your spouse and try to identify why their walls are up. Because they're up for self-preservation. Because they don't feel supported. They don't feel seen. They don't feel valued. They don't feel loved. So then go and love them. And create your marital bliss. I'm Regina Lux with Veritas on the Rocks.